Oh man, my legs, Matthias. How about yours? How are they feeling?
Hey, surprisingly good, surprisingly good. Well, I did take a few days off, so I feel like
Yeah.
I'm recovered. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go, and now they shut down my next location for my next project, and I'm very, very mad. We need to quickly talk about this before we rolling out our guest because this is like hot off the presses.
Yes.
Staircase is closed. Damn it.
Yes. The staircase in Olympic is closed to all access. So if you're thinking of heading out there, you're not going to head out there till probably late September. So enjoy that being a new reality. The problem is from the thousands of cars that were there over the weekend at Party Rock, and then I think there was also a shooting and a stabbing.
Woo.
So that didn't help anything either. So the park is closed. The National Forest access over there is closed, but you can still get to Eleanor by taking the other side. So that's open. So there are some options. Just know that, yeah, the lack of infrastructure and the love of a party rock is responsible for the closures. That's what I have to say about that, Matthias. What about you?
So a little bit of detail around this. Apparently, traffic was backed up so bad this weekend when it was so hot that traffic was backed up all the way down into Hoodsport, which
Yeah, they
is
actually had to shut down part of 101 for a bit.
which is absolutely insane and also amazing. Well, it was hot. Lake Cushman is right there. Everybody went partying, and apparently, the amount of trash and shooting and stabbing. So, yeah, out of control. We need some law and order here. This sucks. In detail, the gate is that the gate that's a quarter mile before
hmm
the Mount Rose trailhead? Am I
I think that's what the gate they're going to use.
okay? Because
So
they are
so I think Mount Rose is closed too, but we'll
okay.
see.
So Big Creek is still accessible.
Yep, yeah, Big Creek's accessible, Eleanor's accessible, the entire north side off of at the three-way stop is still open. So
Okay.
good to go.
All right. So I mean, this is the story. We have a guest. Doug, introduce our guest because we don't really just want to talk about closures. We want to talk
Yeah.
about fun stuff.
So we have a guest today, and we were joking before we recorded that Matthias was going to sing his bio, but I'll read his Instagram bio right now. He's a guide, a teacher, a coach, a speaker, and he currently has 73 out of 100 fastest known times that he's going for. He just completed a Yosemite Picnic, and he'll talk about that in a bit. And he's been doing some awesome infinity loops. His name is Jason Hardrath, and we are happy to have you on. How are you doing today, Jason?
I'm doing really well. Can't
Where are
complain at
you?
all.
Where are you talking to us from today?
I'm sitting just outside of Yosemite National Park, where I can get service for this call, kind of near Lee Vining.
Okay, nice, nice. And I'm assuming you are experiencing some of the smoke conditions too, or is the
Yep,
sky
it
pretty
is
clear?
pretty smoky here, that is for sure.
Well, when you just had a huge adventure on Monday, and there was no smoke at the time then that you dealt with. But before we dive into that, you are a trail runner, a scrambler, a swimmer, a biker. You kind of do a little of everything. But tell us a little about yourself. What do you want people to know about Jason?
What do I want people to know about me? I guess I'm just a kid at heart. I like to play. It's all a playground for me. I think being in touch with our inner kid, so to speak, is really important for like health and wellness and passion and excitement. And so, yeah, I see myself kind of like the kid who's walked out onto a new playground for the first time and gets to run around and go, "Hey guys, what about this? Have you tried this? Let's race on that." Um, and yeah, I think that's a huge part of the perspective I bring to what I do is just being creative and being playful.
And you definitely are creative in some of your routes as of late. When I stumbled across you online, you had just finished the Shasta Infinity Loop, And that was a 60-mile day, 23,803 feet, and 34 hours in 2 minutes.
Yeah, it was
And
a pretty big day.
Pretty big day. What inspires you to do those crazy loops?
I would say, I mean, it kind of goes back to when I did the Rainier Infinity Loop last year. Just kind of discovering these goals that are both inspiring in their magnitude and scary, and like riding the excitement and like building and combining skills to accomplish them. Just, it's a highly engaging process to pull from these different like ultra endurance and mountain guiding backgrounds that I have, rock climbing backgrounds, and to have to combine all those skills and all of the ability of managing suffering and staying in a positive headspace for, 1 or 2 day efforts. It's just, it kind of feels like a larger expression of a wider skill set.
That's
so. Go ahead, Matthias.
No, I just wanted to say, because that's where because you speak about being a kid, and I think we all sort of experienced this as outdoor enthusiasts and trail runners. Once you put the shoes on and step on the trail, it feels there is this childlike excitement, but there is a preparation phase that goes in, especially on those really monster long ones, especially the ones where there's a certain amount of risk involved. That is very serious, and that is very scientific and requires a lot of preparation.
Absolutely. I think sometimes it's a little bit easy for me to forget that I put 16 years into preparation for ultra endurance. I've been in the mountains very regularly for 6 years, both personally and professionally. And I mean, I've been running races and pushing my body in ultra endurance events and learning what it's like to go through different experiences of fatigue or sleep deprivation, or how to address different, fatigue sensations, whether it's nutritional or central nervous system fatigue, or, muscular or electrolyte imbalance, being able to like recognize and address a given situation, but also to sort of have the depth of field to go, okay, because of this, I'm going to feel bad for the next 3-4 hours, but around, X time, I should start feeling better in this one regard. And I think that only comes with a high degree of experience and sort of running experiments on yourself to learn those things, what it feels like to navigate these different scientific topics from an internal perspective on yourself.
Yeah, and I think I think you're touching on something there that's really important, is that there are experiments on yourself that you do to see how you handle certain situations before you go out and you do something like the Rainier Infinity. You have to build up to that, and you have to kind of see how you react to sleep deprivation. How did you start early on training for these adventures that are above and beyond the average day in public lands?
I think it comes back around to that just sort of childhood play exploration. We all have these instincts, these urges. In my teaching, I'm very aware of these because I teach health and physical education. And you never think of a child as a blank slate, that they're showing up with nothing in your room. You think of them as showing up with all of these natural instincts and urges. And what you're doing as a master teacher is channeling those urges they already have for curiosity, for exploration, for play, for laughter, for novel experience, for mastery. And you're channeling those into things as the expert will be good for them developmentally. And so I just apply kind of the same lens to myself. It's like, I have these urges, I have these desires to go out and play, to to tell stories, to inspire others, to explore places I've never been, to explore within myself places I've never been. And so it just sort of, over the years, one thing naturally led to the other as I followed sort of this intrinsic mode of motivation. Well, where it's like, well, I accomplished this thing. Does that mean I can do this now? Or, oh, I've never done this at night. Or, oh, well, I've executed this skill 100 times successfully without a mistake. Can I execute it in this more dangerous context? So just this constant like tweaking and adding in a new variable and adding in a new setting for the skill to be executed in. And then just years of that sort of playful exploration and those personal experiments to arrive at a place where soon you're asking yourself the question, can I do the Rainier Infinity Loop? For real?
I really want to stay on the whole outdoor thing because it's an outdoor podcast, but you're saying you're a teacher. Can we quickly have a little sidebar here and talk about how are you getting ready for the next school year? I mean, we live in crazy times. I've got kids in high school and middle school. Where are you at? It's my very personal question.
I mean, it's so many mixed feelings out there because there's just no way to make everybody happy in this tough situation. I'm at a small rural school, and so because of our distance from any major population area and the small size of our school, we are going to be allowed to do hybrid learning. So I will get to actually have in-person contact with half of my students, my student population each day. And that'll be really a huge improvement from last year for me, because to me, my best teaching is the in the moment, like adapting, teachable moments, catching those moments where a kid can learn something from an experience, whether it's emotional or social, relational, or just from a skill. I would say my weakness as a teacher is the like making sure you answer your emails and having stuff thoroughly planned out, and which is funny because usually you'd think of a teacher being good at that stuff, but all the paperwork stuff is what I'm terrible at. I'm great with the in-person stuff. So last year when they shut everything down completely and we went online, that was really difficult for me because basically everything I'd fallen in love with teaching for was gone. So yeah, it's a mixed bag, and I feel for parents out there, and I feel for, educational leaders out there who are trying to make the best decisions and trying to make their all the ends meet. But I am looking forward to hybrid learning for this upcoming year. It will be a lot of work as teachers because basically now we have to do twice as much work to teach the same number of students. Since we have to prepare both online lessons for the day for our students who are at home and in classroom lessons. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But yeah, we're all trying the best we can.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate you giving us a little bit of insight. I wish you and your students all the best in the coming year. I think we lived through such crazy and unprecedented times, and as much as people have been saying there was a playbook that was thrown out, there really is no playbook on how to make life work in these weird pandemic times. All right, Douglas, back to the outdoor world.
All right, so here's a great segue. So as a teacher, you have summers off, and that is your time to go and really hammer everything hard, right? It seems that looking at this summer, you've done some very impressive things over just weeks. What was there a motivation coming into this year and this summer that this was going to be the year that you really hit a lot of these hard, or did it kind of just you did one and then it grew from there?
I mean, to me, it comes back to sort of that having run those experiments on yourself and knowing yourself, that self-awareness. I know I'm a person, like I'm the ADHD kid who could never sit still, that always wanted to be doing something new and something different and playing. And I'm the same as an adult. Like I have this awareness that I've always loved just being out in the fray, being out in the arena more than I've ever been in love with being the person who had like the perfect race or the perfect performance, because usually if you want to have the perfect race or performance, you have to forego having very many of those performances to have the one perfect one.
Yeah.
And I know my disposition is one that it's like, I just want to throw myself out there and have amazing experiences as often as I can while I'm still alive on planet Earth. And so I bring that perspective to what I do. And then I also know from how my body has handled the last 16 years of ultra endurance that though I'm not a very high performing athlete per se, like I'm not going to ever run close to a 4-minute mile. I'm not going to ever, run close to a 2:30 marathon. Like I'm not going to be in any elite category, no matter how much I train for it.
Yeah.
But I do have a body that seems to be very resilient to injury. So you combine a knowledge of being resilient to injury with a knowledge of just loving being out there. And it makes sense that it's like, okay, I can take my summers as a school teacher. And even though it's going to be full of like exhaustion and fatigue and suffering, I can go out and hammer out these big, amazing routes and just combine experiences that normally might take people years to like link up these different experiences and do them back to back, weekend to weekend. And I've kind of fallen in love with that and just going and like cramming these infinity loops, which is basically like climbing a mountain twice and circumnavigating it all in one effort. And, doing that in a single weekend and then driving to a different mountain and doing the same thing there. There's something kind of magical and beyond ordinary about that kind of experience to me.
Now, there's a lot of people that from the outside of this, that when they look at these infinity loops, when they look at, this Yosemite Picnic, that they're going to say that you are going too fast to enjoy the experience. I saw someone I think they just said a new FKT on the Wonderland, and there were a lot of comments from people being like, well, they just didn't enjoy it. Like they didn't enjoy the scenery. And I'm wondering like, what is at that core for you that you find that enjoyment besides pushing your body, because that's a fun enjoyment in itself. But what's the natural wonder that you're experiencing out there that makes this all worthwhile as well?
Well, I do think I have to kowtow to the internal experience because that is very important to me. Mm-hmm. And I think it should be important to most people because if you're just in like a super casual, lighthearted, this is fun, I'm not really trying hard effort level, like it's fun, but there are some aspects of human engagement that to like be fully engaged, to experience the full spectrum of what it means to be human, you have to be willing to embrace some discomfort.
Yes.
And I think there's things we learn when we're in states of discomfort that we can't learn anywhere else. And you can either choose to learn them in spaces that you choose to be in with physical challenges, or you can wait to learn them until life throws you a hard curveball in your relationships or in your career, and have to try to manage those skills in a time when you don't get to choose it. Mm-hmm. And so I think to me, there's a high value from that internal experience when I'm out there pushing myself hard and facing all of the things I go through while pushing myself hard. And I think to me that adds to the overall aesthetic experience of being on the side of a beautiful, route on a mountain when I'm dialed in and going as hard as I can. I think it's a heightened state for me as opposed to if I just I casually climb mountains. I casually do routes frequently. Like I don't just crush every single day. And it's a lower state of engagement than when I'm dialed to 100. Nice. And so I think that's important to recognize. But also I think there's just a sheer, like how much ground did you get to see, element to it. In that kind of tying back that I did 3 infinity loops on 3 different mountains in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It's like that does not equal less. Like I did not see less. I went and did more. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I can see the argument for like slowing down and enjoying it. And I do get to do that too. I can choose to do that anytime I want. To me, it's like anybody can choose to watch Netflix. I can choose to watch Netflix tomorrow if I want, but if you're not training your body and you're not building your fitness and building your skill sets, then you don't get to choose the things that are harder to do. You can only choose the easy things. And so I think there's value in that as well. Like, build your skills, build your fitness, so you can do the bigger stuff, and you can always choose to do smaller and easier, casual, fun things.
I also liked this idea that a lot of people misunderstand that when you push yourself really hard in those kind of moments, you're actually learning for life when hard stuff gets to you. And you spoke to this a little bit. I think a lot of people are afraid of the pushing when they don't have to, because they feel like they're depleting their resources. And then when shit really hits the fan, when they don't see it coming, they are worried that they don't have the resources to be able to handle this. But actually, if you regularly train and you push yourself to the limit, then you are actually stronger to be able to deal with the realities that are hard, that you do not choose yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. This is scientifically, at this point in human history, this has been scientifically proven and studied in neuroscience, that when you exercise your body and you put stress on your body in a physical way, the mind and body aren't separate. It's all one thing. Like, we're one entity. We like to name things by different names. Oh, it's my mind and my hands and my body. But it's all interconnected. And when you stress the body, you are stressing the mind. And just like muscles, anything biological is an adaptation machine. It adapts to the stresses you place on it. So if you go out and you exercise your body in ways that stress you, in ways that deplete you, that make you feel tired, you have to face fatigue or whatever form of fatigue it might be, your brain is actually reinforcing itself against all forms of stress. You will handle all forms of stress better in life, whether that's curveballs at work or unexpected changes in relationships. You will be able to manage those situations. They will, in your own internal perspective, seem like less of a big deal than they would have if you weren't out doing these things. And science backs that up, that's the way it works. I mean, there's a fabulous book, Spark. I think the subtitle is the interesting research of exercise and the brain. And it outlines how exercising and fitness boosts our memory and our learning potential, stress. Like, the brain is getting exercised when we push our bodies. And I think that's super important for people to realize, that you're not depleting it. It's not like a piece of metal that's getting bent back and forth until it snaps. We're biological. So when we get stressed, whatever gets stressed reinforces itself, just like lifting weights, or how they've discovered that the impact forces, like the vibrations of walking, helps keep elderly people's bones strong, because the bones will keep reinforcing themselves. We're a biological adaptation machine. And I think that's really important to keep in mind whenever you're thinking about what stresses you want to choose to put on yourself or not choose to put on yourself.
That's fascinating. I'll put the link to the book into the show notes, and hopefully this time I'll remember it too. Super cool. That is like super in the weeds. Let's step back and tell us about Yosemite. You've been down there now for a while. Doug casually mentioned picnic. What is it? What are you doing down there? Looking at your Strava and Instagram, it looks crazy.
Yeah, so the Yosemite Picnic was kind of a brainchild of both Ryan Tetz and myself. He'd had this idea of doing a triathlon type effort out of Bishop and biking into the park and then swimming the lake and then doing what's called the Tuolumne Triple Crown. But then I had been aware of David Gonzalez's Grand Teton Picnic effort, which has kind of become a classic over there in Wyoming, where you bike to Jenny Lake from Jackson, you then swim across Jenny Lake, and then you summit the Grand Teton, but then you come all the way back down, swim back across the lake, and bike back to Jackson. And it became very clear after like a few like iterations of this idea that it's like, oh, we have to start down at El Cap, in front of El Cap,
Okay.
at that beautiful iconic view.
Yep.
And bike all the way up to the lake, swim across again. Like some people come to Yosemite just to swim Tenaya Lake. So like standalone people will like come just to do that. So swim across the middle of Tenaya Lake, about 1.1 miles. The bike ride up is about 43 miles. And then do this Tuolumne Triple Crown, which is sort of a iconic, or maybe I should say the iconic rock climbing link up of Tuolumne Meadows. And that's climbing Tenaya Peak, up a 5-4 slab route, and then you run over to Mathis Crest, which has a 5-7 crux, but it's about 2 miles of like perfect rock, razor ridge, just drop offs on either side of you. Super beautiful, about 2 miles of that. And then you drop off and go to Cathedral Peak, which is a 5-6 classic route. And you climb that up to a summit that's like the size of a picnic table and just drops off on all sides. Super beautiful, super classic. Then you run back down to the lake, swim back across to your bike, hop on your bike back down, and the timer stops when you cross the El Cap bridge where you started below El Cap.
So I'm looking at your Strava. You've recorded it obviously as separate activities because they are, biking, running, and swimming. So what did how long did it take you?
In total, we were out there moving for 14 hours and 36 minutes.
Incredible.
Nice.
Is that an FKT? Is that something that has anybody else has done before? Is it an only known time?
As of right now, it is an only known time.
Amazing. Congratulations. This is incredible.
Yeah, it's cool to have, because Yosemite has that, history of like pushing limits and trying new things with all of the rock climbing culture that's gone on there. And so it feels really cool to have contributed kind of a new, fresh, creative twist to a place that already has a history of like trying to find every new creative twist and ways to go fast. It's fun to have like contributed to that culture a little bit.
Go ahead, Doug.
Okay, so with this, you obviously did a lot of different things. But what is a moment of doing this that is currently that really good memory? Obviously, as time moves on, your memories of it shift and certain things become important. But what right now is the cementing iconic moment for you? Like, what's something you keep flashing back to?
I would say two things stand out. When you're on the Mathis Crest, you climb up and it's pretty easy, like 5-5 climbing, and then you traverse for a while, and then you have to drop down between the two summits, the South Summit and the North Summit, and then you get to the crux, the 5-7 diagonal crux of the Mathis Crest, which is they're the hardest moves of the entire day out there. And it's basically exactly halfway into your effort. And here you are at this crux. You've, been out there for 7-8 hours. And you're like, okay, huge exposure. They're not that hard of moves, but just dialing in that moment and getting into that like calm, centered, just absolutely silent headspace and making those moves and kind of pulling through and getting back onto the easier climbing, and just that feeling when you make that final move and you're like, yep, okay, here we go. That moment is a pretty fantastic one that's still fresh in my memory. And then I think, because for me, I'm not the strongest swimmer. I mean, I have a background in triathlon, so obviously I had to be a good enough swimmer to get through an iron distance swim. But it was always my weakest link. So with these types of efforts, the second swim is always kind of looming the whole day. It's like everything else. It's like, oh yeah, I can rock climb. Oh yeah, I can run. Oh yeah, I can bike. And if stuff goes sideways, you just go slower. But with the swim, it's like,
Yeah.
You can only have stuff go so wrong in a swim, and then you're not swimming, you're drowning. And so, yeah, there's definitely some major cramping that happened during the second swim while out there in the middle of the lake. And it's just like, okay, this is real. And having to just like get through that and relax and let the cramps come out. Yeah, that I would say as far as like a low point of the experience, that was probably like kind of the scary moment when those hard leg cramps would come in and it's like, I can't kick with my leg anymore.
So what do you do? Like, what did you do in that? You obviously have the experience to draw from, right? You've had that happen before to some degree, so you aren't immediately going to panic. But like, what did you do to work that out or to loosen your leg back up, or do you know if it's just time will solve it?
So, for one, I mean, obviously, any type of like tension or cramping issue is going to be made worse if you have an anxious reaction to it. Mm-hmm. If you let like your fear reaction take over and you tense up even more. So definitely like staying internally calm, being like, okay, cramps are normal. This is part of it. I tend to center on very functional thoughts. So for me, the functional thought I stick to is, are my arms still pulling? Am I still moving forward? If the answer is yes, I'm fine. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, the cramps are in my legs, my arms were still pulling. So even though I'd have to like hold my leg in a weird way that would slow my swimming way down, when these cramps would come, I would just kind of keep the arms churning and go, even if I have to hold this position for the rest of the swim, eventually I get there. Mm-hmm. And just kind of staying in this kind of calm sense of reminder that it's like, I am making forward progress. Yes, this isn't optimal, but that's okay. I didn't expect it to be optimal. Yeah. And then I had one cramp that was so severe that I had to flip over on my back and just breathe really slow and float for a while. And then it finally relaxed out, just kind of floating there and breathing. But all the other ones, I just kind of swam through it.
That's nice. Amazing. Well, the swimming part is like, that freaks me out. Did you not like on the way down think about, well, perhaps I'll not swim and just run around the lake to my bike?
Not on this one. I did have a different picnic effort where there were thoughts that it's like, you know what, I'm just going to stop at the top of the mountain. It was the Shasta picnic. I'm just going to stop at the top of the mountain. There's no way I'm going to make it through that second swim. But then on my way back down the mountain, I'm like, you know what, I feel okay. I should at least try. And then ended up having a great second swim. And so I think that kind of built my confidence for this one, that it's like, even when you think stuff is going to go sideways and there's no way, if you just give it time and take care of your body's needs, oftentimes you can rally and still outperform what your expectations are.
Yeah, that's awesome. What do you do with gear? Very practically. You obviously, have a hydration pack on the run. What do you do with the hydration pack for the swim?
So what made the most sense for this one was we went self-supported style. So we cached, we cached stuff on either side of the lake. Started off with our bike stuff, switched to our swim stuff. When we got to the far side of the lake, our run stuff was stashed behind a log. And then just kind of reversed everything on the way back out.
Oh, brilliant.
You could do it in an unsupported style though. If you just, say wore your hydration pack for the bike ride and then had just like a dry bag that you could blow up and float behind you. And then you could keep your shoes and your hydration pack in there and just tow it behind you as you swam. And you could do it that way in a completely unsupported style.
Yeah, I've been watching that World's Toughest Race on Amazon Prime, which is that eco challenge race that just got rebooted with Bear Grylls, and they're going like over the island of Fiji and they're constantly submerged in water for hours at a time, and they have a backpack on and they constantly take the backpack in the water. And I'm always trying to figure out the logistics of how they're doing this, because from the way it's shot, it looks like they're just constantly wet nonstop. I'm like, at some point you gotta dry out at least a little bit. This is days on time at a time.
Yeah, that would be something.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's
And so along the gear lines, with these infinity loops that you've been doing in the picnics, what is your typical gear setup? What are you bringing with you? What are you prioritizing? What are things that you maybe wish you would have brought with you?
So I guess the simple breakdown for like any effort that's going to involve snow or glaciated terrain, you're going to have some kind of traction, whether it's micro spikes or I have a set of La Sportiva blizzards with the built-in micro spikes. And I have enough experience to kind of gauge when the snow conditions will be suitable for those versus a lightweight set of aluminum crampons that are compatible with running shoes. Mm-hmm. And so I'll kind of gauge the conditions of the routes and the steepness of the routes I'm going to be on and make a selection there. But those are kind of the three you're choosing between is either, a micro traction device, built-in micro spikes or crampons. I have ultra lightweight ice axes, Petzl Ride, I believe is what they are. Okay. And so those, I'll either bring one or two of those depending on the steepness and difficulty of the terrain I'm going to be on. And then I'll use trekking poles, because when you're trying to move light and fast on the steep snow terrain, you're able to keep a better upright posture when you're using poles than when you have your axe out. Mm-hmm. And so if it's not steep enough or icy enough that I feel a need to have my axe out, or if there's like a really solid boot track, then I'll just keep my poles out so that I can keep that better posture for easier breathing and less tension on your lower back, which makes you more efficient. And then I'll usually have between 1 and 3 liters of Tailwind nutrition with me mixed in my water, which is a electrolyte and calorie mix. So that helps me reduce the amount of volume and the amount of weight I need to bring along for these really long efforts. That way I can use a smaller bag. And then just have less things to fiddle with, kind of streamlines everything where I know if I'm taking in proper hydration, I'm also taking in proper calories.
What's your favorite Tailwind flavor?
I bounce between either the lemon or the unflavored, I would say. Sometimes the orange.
Yeah, I just ordered the lemon and the unflavored one too. I was surprised how much I like the unflavored one. I first had to try it and I was like, well, I mean, it's a free sample. I'll try it. And I was like, oh, this is actually really good. I like this.
Yeah, because it's so easy to get burned out on like the overly syrupy flavors when you're out there.
Yep.
Since you are consuming a ton of sugary carbs. So yeah, sometimes it's nice to not have the extra flavors in there. And then I do this thing that I think is a little bit different than some people in that I think of any snack that I take beyond, my essential, like I know my essential calories are being taken in through the mix, right? That's what the science shows.
Yeah.
So I bring along things that I know I'm going to look forward to eating, just like, whether I have a craving for a Snickers bar, or sometimes I really love salami when I'm in the mountains.
Not the only one, Matthias.
I know.
Yeah,
salami is.
So yeah, I think of that as like a psychological food, right? Mm-hmm. Like I'm going to use it for a psychological boost at some point. It's not essential. But at some point, if I'm like, oh man, I'm feeling kind of low, I can eat that, get the little bit of a dopamine boost. And we know from, neuroscience that anytime dopamine gets released in the brain, it buffers and dampens the stress hormones present in the brain and makes the effort feel lesser. That's why, like, when you're out with a group of people or working really hard on a group project and then somebody cracks a joke, suddenly it kind of feels easier to go back to doing the thing. It's not quite so bad anymore. It's because that release of dopamine kind of dampens the stress hormones in our brain and sort of essentially makes it our perceived effort lower.
Mm-hmm. That's why it's nice to go running with somebody else, right? Because you have this distraction, you have this conversation, and the effort feels so much lower, even though other person is still not carrying you.
Yep, exactly.
Oh yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned one of my favorite questions to ask every guest we have is what sort of foods do you crave out there? And I'm glad you got to it before I could ask. That just made me so happy, and I just wanted to point that out to everybody that I don't have to ask that today.
People were like listening in, and I was like, "When is the question coming? When is the question coming?"
Exactly, it happens every time.
Yeah.
Beat you to the punch.
Is there something that you used to bring with you on these mountain days, long days out on trails that you realize you just don't need anymore, or you no longer find useful? Like have you lightened your pack at all?
You know, I came at this mountaineering thing from already having a background in ultra running. So I think I actually kind of started from the other direction where I had this thought in my mind where, okay, I'm capable of running, 62 or 100 miles, climbing this, think of, say, like Mount Shasta. It's like 11 miles round trip to climb the mountain. And yeah, there's a ton of gain and loss. And yeah, you're at elevation. And yeah, there's snow travel. But in my mind as an ultra athlete, it was like, yeah, but it's still just 10 miles. So there was this thought of I'm not going to need much. I can kind of pack light. Cause I know at any point I can turn around and just jog the downhill and be back to the car in, less than an hour. And so I kind of came with that perspective, which, had its lessons to learn the other direction of like when a really cold day, it would be really cold on the top of the mountain. It's like, wow, this is a lot of suffering for, not bringing one extra layer. Yeah. And so I kind of came at it from that other perspective. So I think I've kind of arrived at a place where I stay just comfortable enough now, and have just a little bit of leeway in case something goes wrong. So yeah, I kind of came at it that other direction rather than starting off as just a traditional mountaineer with like a 40-pound pack of gear, mm-hmm. and then slowly having to like go, well, I guess I don't need this or don't need that. Plus I was broke and couldn't afford all that gear. So it was much easier to just go with, the tattered running shoes and whatever cheap crampons I could find and 40-year-old ice axes.
That's always the beauty of the trail runner, right? I mean, considering many other sports, it's very, very inexpensive to get out there and find adventure without breaking the bank.
Yeah, so true. So true.
I often think about winter excursions or mountaineering excursions where you're required to bring more gear. I'm always like, I don't have the money to invest into insulated mountaineering boots for $700.
Yeah, it's the mountaineering side of stuff can be ridiculously expensive. It's kind of like, I think of it's similar to like triathlon where the threshold for entry is so high.
Yes.
You got to buy a triathlon bike and a wetsuit and helmet, and shoes. And yeah. Mountaineering, it's the same way. You got to get all those layers and you got to buy the right tent. And yeah, it adds up really quick.
I mean, it's fun. I mean, we love gear, right? I mean, we can talk about gear all day long, but it does make the credit card bleed very quickly.
Yeah, and then it comes back around to, well, it's probably still worth it.
Well, that's the problem, right? I mean,
well, it's a little debt versus experience, right? It's
why would my kids need to eat? I need new boots.
If things get hard enough, they can eat your boots. That's what they did during the Depression, right?
I know, but I mean, it was a different material back then.
That's true.
I think La Sportiva, even with salt, doesn't taste very good.
That would be an interesting recipe book.
Yeah.
In a pinch, what gear can you eat?
Yeah, if there's any listeners that have an old pair of La Sportiva boots they want to eat, and let us know how it tastes. And so you've done this picnic, you've done Shasta, you've been up to Rainier, you've done all of these great things. Is there a favorite experience, or is it always the one you've just had?
Oh man,
I know that's such an easy question to answer. So
The answer is yes, all of the
yes,
above.
yes.
I think I have different aspects of different efforts that just stand out and make them seem excellent. I think of again, the Rainier Infinity Loop, like we've alluded to, just it's a 136 mile day, 44,000 feet of elevation gain. You're out there for more than a day. You're on glaciated terrain. I did it solo, so I was having to make decisions on, crevassed glaciers on my own, in sleep deprived states, in the dark. And then also completing this, the Wonderland Trail by itself is, 94 miles long. And so definitely experiences going internally. At a very young age, a mentor of mine, he told me this quote that stuck with me. He said, human beings are like a tube of toothpaste. You find out what's really inside when they get squeezed. And I think I've become obsessed with that concept, where it's like these physical efforts are a way to truly find out, am I the person I think I am? Do I really live to the values I hope I do? And I remember that one just having this distinct moment, being overwhelmed to tears as I realized my body was too broken to go fast enough on the second night to stop for sleep. I realized the mental calculations, I'm only able to move this fast right now. To guarantee I can beat this record, I need to not sleep, even though I only slept an hour the night before. And marching into that and facing the increasingly deeper pain cave and suffering, I had this sort of transcendent experience where it's I am embodying tenacity. This is tenacity right here. I would hope that I am a tenacious person who won't give up in the face of overwhelming odds. And here I am living it. As in pain and sleep deprived and broken as I've been, here I am still marching forward. And moments like that, I mean, man, you can't I can't put a value on that, right? There's no numbered dollar amount I could put on how valuable that type of experience is, as a human being. And then there's other experiences where, I did the Cascade Trifecta, and just the experience of watching sunrise on Rainier and being on Adams at noon and then watching sunset on Hood. It's just this cool, beautiful, fast, fun experience to be on 3 cool mountains in the same day. And, this Yosemite Picnic, mixing skills from what I refer to as my prior life. I had a big car accident in 2015 where I was ejected from the vehicle, broke 9 ribs, collapsed a lung, destroyed my ACL and LCL in my right knee. And so I refer to my competitive life before that as my former life. And in my former life, I was this triathlete and this marathon runner and this 10K runner. And so to be pulling some of those skills forward now and applying them in this new context with picnics, and mixing it with these new rock climbing and mountaineering skills is kind of fun. It's a throwback to this, past that I had, where it's oh wait, these skills are like riding a bike. I can still do them. So different things stand out with different ones. Sometimes it's that one route was particularly beautiful. Sometimes it's about the experience I was having internally on that route. Sometimes it's about the people I was with.
Oh, that's
Nice.
awesome. So the goal is lots and lots of FKTs. Which ones are next? What's on the horizon?
Well, I think I'm staring down the barrel of what they call Norman's 13. It's one that's kind of scared me, similar to the Rainier Infinity Loop. It's big, it's long, it's 100 miles long. You have some very exposed, high elevation rock climbing with 5.6 and 5.7 difficulty, even 1.59 move, and a whole lot of ground to cover. It's a route that links all of the 14ers of the Sierra Nevada range.
Okay.
And you do it all on foot. Yeah, so that one's been one that's been on my mind for a while, and just recently it sort of moved from just kind of floating in my mind as like I want to do that at some point to oh crap, I think it's time.
You can't push it out any further. That's ridiculous. I mean, that's the amazingness of this sport, right? Or this pastime, this activity, this lifestyle, whatever you want to call it, is that sort of the ingenuity, the creativity is limitless. For a while, we thought marathons was it, and then triathlons were sort of the pinnacle of the endurance sport of what's possible, right? But there is really an unlimited amount, especially now that most of the important mountains have been climbed. These link ups and traverses really opens up a completely new world of possibility.
Absolutely. And I think that's something I'm excited about. The teacher in me wants people to be inspired and wants people to go try whatever it is that adds meaning and happiness to their life. And so like I think about like this picnic concept of bike, swim, run or mountain, whatever it is, and then swim and bike back to where you started. Like that's something you could apply on your, from your local town to a local lake and up a local mountain. So like people being inspired to go out and do these things and try these things, whether they're doing them fast or slow, or doing, an infinity loop on something that's near them where it's like, oh, there's routes on either side of this mountain. It's super beautiful. And, they don't even have to do it for an FKT. The point, oftentimes when I pass people on the mountains, they always want to sort of do a comparison. And I know they're not intentionally doing it, but they're like, oh, you're making us all look bad, is, something that'll often come out. And it's like, no, like how fast I'm moving relative to you, me taking three steps faster than you. Like we're on a giant rock hurling through space around a nuclear reactor. Like it doesn't matter. What matters is, are you having a full experience inside yourself? It doesn't matter who's objectively moving faster or slower. If you're having the best experience of your life, it doesn't matter. Like that's what it's about. Go find the thing that motivates you. Go find the creative pursuit in the outdoors that you're like, oh man, I'm going to have to like try these new skills, or like, I've never swam a lake like this before, or whatever it is, where you feel that sense of novelty and challenge, and you're going to be engaged with the process of both preparing and doing and excited with the end result afterwards. That's what it's about.
I mean, yes, that's exactly it. That was beautiful. Doug, I'm speechless.
Well, and that's one reason this level of inspiration and this outlook is one reason why we're really excited to have you here, is because there are goals that everyone can set that may not be, we're not all on the same level, and that's fine because we all have these opportunities to do things. And that's where, since you're teaching these kids about this, do you tell your students kind of what you are doing in hopes that it motivates them, or do you kind of keep this quiet from students and staff?
Well, with other staff, there's always this element of I don't want them to think I'm too crazy. But with the students, I definitely try to tell stories and try to impart the if I guess you could call it wisdom for life that I get from these things. I try to show them pictures of places I've been and things I do, and empower them that, hey, I'm just some kid from some small town myself. Like there's nothing particularly special about my story or my genetics or, the socioeconomic status I was born into. And I'm out here having these amazing adventures and thoroughly enjoying it. And if I can do it, I firmly believe you can too. Whether that's, in the physical realm like I do it, or in art or in music or in some other thing you find highly engaging. And so I do try to integrate that very much into the message and the culture of my class space, for sure.
No, that's awesome, because I think, to normalize pushing comfort zone, growing, everything like that is such an important message for so many to get, no matter what their age, because we're constantly, growing up, these things aren't as possible, and you start to box yourself in with your thinking and your line of thought, and to break out of that becomes this freeing thing. And what you are speaking to is that you have this freedom now to just be able to connect and go, and you're able to listen to your body, you're able to listen to the elements and just do what you can. And yes, you put expectations on yourself, but it's all about growing as a human and having an experience on like you said, a rock hurtling through space that just it doesn't really matter, right? It's just it's personal growth, and to be able to inspire others to do it, that's just a really awesome thing to do.
Absolutely. It's that is why I teach. One of my favorite, I've said this since like my first year as a teacher. I've told people teaching is just a giant cover up to meet and inspire young people. And it's that same motivation is why I'm talking with you today. It's like, I would rather, I'm not much to like go to a bar and brag. I would rather just be out doing the next big thing instead. That's way more enjoyable to me. But when I have a chance to speak in a way that someone might gather value from it and live a better life because of it, then to me, that's too important as a human being to pass up. Whether it's in the classroom or having a conversation with you guys over a digital medium like this.
So you're doing all these activities, and obviously you're spending lots of time, brain capacity, from a research point of view, money to get gear. How do you ask yourself this question, and how far away are you from asking yourself this question now? Should you become a professional athlete and do this full time? Is that something that's on your radar? Is that something you're wondering about?
I mean, becoming a professional athlete, I feel like I'm a firm believer of don't create problems you don't actually have yet. And I don't think I need to spend time worrying about becoming a professional athlete until someone offers to pay me to be a professional athlete. Then I can worry about that question. For now, I'll just happily keep chasing what makes me feel inspired and alive. And if somebody wants to start paying me to do that, awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think because I know I love creating moments of learning, aha moments, breakthrough moments for people, I know that I'll need to keep some sort of a context of passing on what I've learned and inspiring others as a part of my life throughout my life. Because I think if I eliminated that completely and just became like a professional athlete and I didn't do anything to like speak or coach or help people, I think it would start to have less meaning to me. I wouldn't be as happy with what I was doing because I think the two have to fit with each other. I think that's how we're meant to operate as human beings.
Yeah, I can see that, and I can hear that in your voice and the way you just describe your efforts, your outings. That it's always this interplay between not just a physical activity. It's not a number game. You're not chasing crowns or local legend status on Strava just for the sake of it, right?
Yeah, everything fits as like a part of a bigger picture and a bigger story. Absolutely.
So if people are inspired by the way you're approaching things, they can't become your student. But what grades are you teaching?
I teach K through 6 right now, and then I have some mentorship relationships with middle school and high school age kids because we have a campus where it's K through 12.
Okay, great. So lots of kids can sort of get inspired by you, but where do people, if somebody is inspired by what they're hearing in this podcast, how do they get in contact with you? Do you teach grown-ups too?
I do. I mean, I teach mountaineering courses. I guide. I'm an online coach, so they can access me in those ways. I tend to give out a ton of advice for free if people reach out on social media, because I just love seeing people thrive. So connecting with me on social media, at Jason Hardrath on Instagram. I tend to be the only Jason Hardrath that pops up on Facebook. I have a website that's also just my first and last name, jasonhardrath.com. It's kind of still in process of being built, so don't have too high of expectations as you go there. I'm only human, and I enjoy the outdoors more than I like computers. I would say those are the easiest ways to get in touch, and start a conversation, depending on whether you like what that person happens to be looking for.
Doug, I didn't mean to sort of to turn this already into where you're a social plug, even though it's good if you did that. I was just curious. Doug, do you have anything else?
Yeah, you mentioned a few times about guiding, and I'm curious where you guide and a bit of a background about that, like how you got started in it, and you know, some of those stories from there.
Well, guiding kind of felt like I've been a professional guide for 2 years now, and it kind of felt like a natural new experiment to run, something new to learn. Mm-hmm. About 2 years ago, I reached out to Shasta Mountain Guides because they're right near where I live in Southern Oregon. And I reached out to them and was like, hey, I have all this background in teaching. I have this resume of mountains that I've climbed. What certifications would I need to get to be able to come and perhaps be a part of your team? I'm very interested. And they were super stoked on the teaching experience. And, so I got my WFR and I got avalanche training and went to their guide training. And we really hit it off. And so, since then I've been guiding for them regularly on Mount Shasta. And then that's my main professional guiding context. I do a little bit of stuff here and there on other mountains with people. But most of the times that I'm doing stuff, it's on Shasta.
Nice. Yeah. You're in a very good area down in that Southern Oregon, according to where your Strava says you're located. Have you debated, or do you know anybody that's done a infinity run swim around Crater Lake?
Around Crater Lake? Well, you're technically not allowed to swim across Crater Lake, so I would hope not.
That's too bad.
But there is another lake nearby, Diamond Lake, which is a really big freaking lake, just right near there, maybe 20, 30-minute drive that would be perfect for that because it has a trail that goes all the way around it.
Oh, nice. It's just one of those more smaller and more manageable for people maybe to get out there. I think down in that area there's a lot of hidden gems. I know I've gone down and just looked at the mountains down there and I'm like, I need to do that one and that one and that one, and then still haven't, but someday a road trip's going to be there and just explore, because you're in the good mountain territory. Along that same line, is there an area you look at that you think that's where I want to be next? That's where I want to have as a base camp and explore for a long period of time?
I'd like to spend some time overseas in South America. There's some big mountains there that I would love to apply some of these concepts to. For sure. One of my big goals is to, now somebody's going to steal my idea who has more money than me, be the first person to put an infinity loop over the top of a 20,000 plus foot volcano. Mm-hmm. So I'd love to go do something like that. It seems like lots of stuff is always happening near Boulder, Colorado. So it would be fun to spend some time around there. And then I have my eye on a few things in the European theater that would be fun to go make efforts on.
Nice. Yes, Europe. That's where the infinity loops are fairly reasonable, right? The trails everywhere, mountains are accessible.
It's the options there. Yeah, it's a pretty thriving area for outdoor experiences. That's for sure.
I remember when the late Uli Steck put 82 peaks over 4,000 meters in the Alps together, and he biked in between them and paraglided down on some of them. That was the first time when I've sort of kind of got introduced to the idea of doing kind of putting your own route together between peaks, not just traversing, but kind of thinking about more creative projects like that. I loved seeing him put that project together.
Absolutely, I love it. I love it that we've reached a place because, you know, as you said earlier, most of the great objectives on this planet have been sort of conquered in that first ascent sort of style. I mean, there's still some of them that exist, absolutely, but they're fewer and further between. And so I think that great spirit of exploration has gone to, well, how fast can it be done? And now it's looking to, well, in what different creative ways can it be done while also doing it fast and also doing it on major peaks. And it's kind of a fun time to be a part of that, where it's like, oh, I can human power this connection in this way, or pull a kayak out here, or swim over here, ride a bike, grab a paraglider. Yeah, it's a really interesting time to be alive as a human being.
Yeah, I feel you, and I think it's interesting because we've sort of pushed the limit of risk to a point where it becomes only the very, very, very few can risk things, and the return rate isn't that great, right? So you're dialing away from that, and then speed too has also limits. And so now these link ups come up where you combine the uniqueness of the route, so you get that exploration again, and you combine it with speed because gear is just getting so freakishly good that speed is even possible, right? And then the other big thing that what Uli Steck always said is that speed allows you to calculate the weather better, right? I mean, what made it possible for him to go through the Eiger so many times so fast was that he knew that he can do it in a few hours and the weather would hold. What made the Eiger so murderous was that people spent 5-6 days in it, and nobody could forecast 5-6 days of consistent weather on a mountain like that. But if you're fast, you are actually safer in some respect, right?
I completely agree. I think there is a degree of safety in speed.
Mm-hmm. No, exactly. And so now you've got these link ups which open up complete new territories. I'm completely fascinated by that because it lays out places that we've never envisioned before. And I've myself I'm sort of a single activity athlete. I've not really practically considered what you're saying, paragliding, kayaking, or biking, but that then in itself expands so much more options of what is possible. It's fantastic. Logistically, it gets a little trickier, but if you have the gear, all of a sudden a lot more becomes possible. I like the term picnic. I had never heard of that before.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a fun name for it. I have to give credit again to David Gonzalez for that. He's the one that coined that name. I find it to be sort of a fun juxtaposition since you're going out on this epic day. It's like, it's a picnic.
Yeah. It's perfect.
Yeah. I do have one kind of personal-ish question, but who inspires you for adventure? Is it anyone, or are you just now inspiring yourself?
You know, that is a weird question for me because I do think a lot of people spend a lot of time watching a particular other person or multiples of other people.
Mm-hmm.
I can't distinctly point to anyone that's been a major inspiration. I mean, I had a really fabulous training partner back when I first got into Ironman, he was this old guy that was just strong. He was he was still pretty young at the time. He was in his 40s, but made everything I did look like a Boy Scout. And I was in my 20s, and like, you're supposed to be like as strong as you get when you're in your 20s. And he just made me look like a Boy Scout with every training thing we did. And it just but he didn't do it in a mean way. He just was like, we'd be riding the biggest climb I've ever climbed on a bike, say. And he would just circle and coast down and come back to me and start riding up with me, chit-chatting. And it was just like, oh, so this is normal. And I think that perspective just sort of sank in as a part of my normal mental framework, that like, however hard something gets, however big something seems, it can also just be the normal. And I think that's guided me, along with this sense of play and exploration of what's possible. And so I would say that my inspiration is just seeing all these different ideas and ways multiple people do things. I've referenced like David Gonzalez with the picnic, and Chad Kellogg, he had the first idea for an infinity loop. Yep. And so it's like, none of us succeeds in a vacuum. We're standing on the shoulders of all those that came before us, and we're influenced by all those around us. But accounting for that, I think a lot of it has just been exploration and play inside of that space.
Nice. And that's kind of where we're lucky enough to be so connected right now, to see what everybody else is doing in such an easy way. You can kind of just get inspired by activity and start dreaming yourself, instead of necessarily the hero worship that may have come from magazines and stuff, when you only had one or two people that you knew of doing this. Where if you look right now, I mean, infinity loops are so popular right now. And so, that you have to race around, and that you'd already know, like, hey, if I mention this, someone else might grab it, right? There is this healthy level of competition. And so it's fun to see and be inspired just by the community as a whole. And that was just nice to hear from you. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. It is how it is now. That's the state of the world. And I think that you nailed a very positive element of our interconnectedness, that we have this ability to see more concepts being repeated by multiple people, as opposed to just seeing one person and like worshiping them. And I think that sort of helps facilitate everybody doing more.
Well, yeah, it just becomes something that is now like, okay, I may not be able to do the Rainier Infinity Loop, but I can definitely put something together outside my house. I can then bring this to me. I can make this accessible. And it's so exciting to hear that. And that's where, I'm loving with the new gear, like Matthias was talking about, with this level of pushing that we're able to do, there's a new world of activity and completion to have, and growth to find out there. And so it's a fun time, despite all the chaos. It's a fun time to be alive, just for sport, at least.
Agreed.
Brilliant. Jason, thank you so much. Doug, anything else?
I don't think so. I'm eager to hear about your next adventures. Feel free to reach out, drop in anytime you want to if you want to let people know where you're going to be, if you're ever doing any teaching or talks when those things can resume in person. We'll gladly help you out with that. Do you have anything to plug, Jason? Gear companies that are helping you out, or you already talked about your website and stuff like that, if you want to mention it again too.
So I definitely want to plug Athletic Brewing. I think they've been really supportive and loved my story with chasing these 100 FKTs, and sort of my uncompromising just push toward accomplishing these goals, even in the face of this pandemic and all the changes that came along with it. And they make a fabulous product. They're pushing a new market in non-alcoholic beers. And I think it's really easy to get behind a product like that, because even though I personally have never struggled with alcohol addiction, I know for some people this is like a game-changing product that allows them to still have the social life and still have the flavor and eliminate something that's been toxic in their life. And so for me, as like the teacher in me, it's super easy to like stand for something that's making moves and making ripples like that in the market. So yeah, I'll plug for Athletic Brewing. You can order it from their website because it's non-alcoholic. Have it delivered to your door. There's a discount code on my Instagram, Jason Hardrath, or Jason H, all caps, 20. So try it out. And,
this is brilliant. Before you jump on, I don't know if you knew that, but the German soccer national team World Cup winners in when did they win the World Cup in Brazil? I don't even remember when Brazil happened, but they had a non-alcoholic beer that they were drinking throughout the World Cup as part of their recovery drinks because it had the right kind of chemical elements that they needed from a recovery point of view, and it was non-alcoholic, and so it's brilliant that this is becoming something that in the US is catching on, because you've always gotten some obscure non-alcoholic beers that were like German imports or so, but it wasn't really something that's out there. So I'll definitely gonna check that out, because I mean, Germany scored 7 goals against Brazil in that World Cup. That's important it is important to remember and to never forget, people. Never forget. Anyway, Athletic Brewing. Go check it out.
And then to relate back to the gear question earlier, I don't think I ever brought this up, but one of the ways I light my gear is I use Ultimate Directions bags. And they brought me on as part of the team to help refine products. And yeah, so Ultimate Directions vests and bags tend to be a really good go-to for me. So I'll put a little plug for them. Prevail Botanicals, they make a great CBD product for, getting away from just using acetaminophen or ibuprofen. Because, sometimes you've got those aches and pains after an effort. I know at one point in my life, I was taking way too much ibuprofen. So those are my plugs for people who support me and whose products I can happily endorse. And then my website, jasonhardrath.com, Instagram @JasonHardrath. And you can find me on Facebook too.
Perfect. We'll make sure that all of this is linked, people, so you don't have to scribble it down. Go to the show notes at outdoor-society.com and find all the links easily clickable. How convenient is that?
And I do have one more question for you, Jason, and it's the hardest one of the day. Do you have any questions for us before we let you go back to your day in Yosemite?
One question for you guys. What inspires you to do this show, or what impact do you hope it has?
Ooh, that's a great one. Go ahead, Matthias. I'll think on it, and you can answer first.
I was hoping to try to explore the adventure part of trail running when I started this. I mean, there was a very casual aspect, and perhaps Doug is going to speak to the casual aspect, which is, which I'm letting him speak to it. But for me, I think I listened to some of the trail running podcasts and found that many of them were focused on they were coming from the professional, but very competitive, collegiate, cross-country, marathon running aspect. And so there was a lot of talk about accurate nutrition and pacing and strides and training programs and plans. And I wanted to explore the adventure piece of trail running. And I felt like at that point that didn't exist. I haven't recently looked. There might be some that are sort of exploring this as well. There, from a participant, from a bystander, I've been in love with rock climbing, even though myself I'm awful at it. I don't do it enough, but I enjoy the adventure piece of rock climbing in the way the stories are being told there, and I wanted to bring these stories to trail running because I think the sport so much more leans itself to the adventure side than to just I'm a washed up marathon runner who needs to find trails in order to be competitive again. And so this was for me sort of my inspiration of starting this podcast and telling these kind of stories. So you coming on fits the bill perfectly. So that's brilliant.
Yeah, and for me, when we started this, it was one of those, we would have these conversations about running, life, everything while running together, and or while having a beer after an adventure. And we were just like, hey, let's bring this to more people. We find this entertaining. We enjoy this, and it's something that we wanted to share. And it's definitely about, encouraging people to be storytellers in their own right. That's something we talk about a lot, is to let people know that while you see all of these amazing, huge adventures, that while you can strive to do those and maybe you won't reach that goal, there's still other adventures to have. There's still ways for you to take ownership of your experiences outdoors. And that's something that's been really rewarding, is just to be able to share what we've been doing in a way that, again, hopefully inspires other people to keep going out, and not in a way that says, here's the benchmarks you need to hit, here's what you need to do, but just to be a positive influence in a community that can be competitive. And that's really where I think I've been happiest with this, is, I just get to talk to Matthias every week, and we just get to hang out like we always do. And it's been really nice. And so between those two things and just being able to enjoy nature, that's what I'm all about. What I hope that happens, the goals of this is just, more people being out, more people sharing sport, and, hopefully we can create some new trails and some new experiences and kind of change the culture. So Sundays aren't just for football, but they can be to run with friends and family or explore trails with friends and family. So that's my short answer for that.
I love that. And I love that element of storytelling. Because, here I am on a podcast right now, but literally my first audience for my outdoor stories was, groups of 3rd, 4th, 5th graders that I could tell to sit down and listen to me or walk with me and listen to me. And some of them were like, oh, he's going to talk again. And and they wanted to be playing whatever game we were playing. And others were like, oh yeah, cool. Another story. I'm excited. And so it's like, being willing to tell these stories, whether they're big or small, to whoever your audience is going to inspire at least some to go do something more than they were doing. And so I do love that as an element of your goal, that, yeah, tell your story, do your adventure, whether it's big or small, because you don't know who you will inspire. Even if you think, oh, I haven't done the big thing that so-and-so has done. It's like, well, that might not matter to that person that's listening to you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It's just the funness of being inspired and being able to inspire, because every time we talk to somebody on here, I'm just like, oh man, now I really have to go on an adventure. So I think you talking about your Yosemite picnic, I've been on the fence about an adventure, and I think that just like kicked me off the fence, and I'm like, I have to do it. Why am I not doing it? It's something I've been training for and planning, so why don't I just go and do it? So I appreciate that.
This talk is already a success.
You see, I was so excited to share my big adventure plan, and as we started off, the road to it just got shut down for the next 6 weeks. So everything got just completely canceled for me. So I have to now look at a plan B, a plan C or alter the course to see if I can still do it in some other way, shape, or form. So
how about the Mount Townsend Infinity Loop, Matthias?
Well, that's always on the horizon, but it's not quite as big as what I had planned for September. Okay. So
that's fair.
That's a perfect good bystander, and I'm happy to do that and roll it in. But
it's not the same. I get it.
It's not quite the same. So I want to fight a little bit more to see if I can find something a little bit more comparable.
Awesome. All right. Well, Jason, thank you so much for for being on this week. I hope that you have a couple more good adventures planned in the next few days and weeks. And like I said, feel free to stop by, reach out, and if anybody wants to connect, he's given you everything, and I think your information will be in the show notes. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day and chatting with us. It's greatly appreciated.
Thanks for having me on, guys. It has been an absolute pleasure.